You know what? We did something fun last weekend. You ready for this? We did a trust fall here at Missouri City with 10 couples. You know what the trust fall is? We did a couples fantasy football draft. Now, it's a trust fall because two of the rounds, the third and the sixth, we had the husbands all leave the room and the wives had to pick on their own without any help. Which made it interesting, right? Because there's a few wives that kind of knew about football, so it was an advantage for them. But most of the wives were just there to have fun, support the husband, do something together, and really didn't know what was going on, or maybe didn't know as much about the players this time around. And so it was a bit of a trust fall to kind of put the decision in their hands. And I just want to say, Sarah, my wife, killed it. She got the two best players at the Pointe, which was so exciting, and it was awesome. But you think about that, you think about this idea that, hey, we had a decision to make it, so we give you all the tools we can, we instruct the best we can, we give you all the tips, and then we leave the room because at the end of the day, the decision's up to you. And that's actually really helpful for us in life because there's a lot of moments like that. In fact, that's where we're headed today as we look at this passage of Scripture. Now, what we're going to talk about today is a story that is told in children's ministries all across the world, pretty much every year. It's the story of Jesus and Zacchaeus. Now, maybe if you've been in church, you're familiar with that. If you haven't, you're going to learn all about it today. But what's cool about this story is it has some very helpful things in it for you and I. And so towards the end of our message today, we're going to have 3 questions that we're going to look at that I think are going to challenge our thinking just a little bit. But to start, let's jump in. So we're in this series. We started it last week. It's from the book of Luke, and we're calling it Following Jesus. And so to set the tone, let's look at the first verse from chapter 19, and let's see what it says, and it'll help set the scene. Here's what it says. He, talking about Jesus, entered Jericho and was passing through. Okay, so let's pause. This is important, sets the tone for us for the rest of the day. So first, we see that Jesus is making his way through Jericho, right? It says he was passing through. Now, the idea here is we are about maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks away from the cross. And so Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, but on his way to Jerusalem, he stops in Jericho, and he's going to have this incredible encounter with a man named Zacchaeus. Now, the other thing that's important to note here is that as Jesus is making his way through, everywhere he went, he was always on mission. He was always looking for someone or something he knew he was going to accomplish. He was teaching, he was healing, he was empowering, he was doing all these things. And so we're going to see another example of that as we move into this text. All right, you ready? Okay, let's look at verse 2. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, and he was a chief tax collector and was rich. Okay. Now, it's possible this may not hit us the same if we don't understand the context. So first thing to note, it says that this man Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Now, we're familiar with taxes, all right? I don't think any of us get too excited when we look at our check and realize it's significantly less than what we thought it was going to be because of taxes, right? Or maybe you get a commission check and it feels like they took 70% out, right? Some of you understand that? Maybe not. Okay. Taxes are a deal, but the thing is, we understand, as much as we may not like it, that that money is going to something. It's going to school, it's going to the city, it's going to better things. But in this day and age, what was happening is the oppressor of the time, which was Rome, was taking the taxes, and most of the time, it was not coming back to the Jewish people to help them. It was simply just leaving. And so this was frustrating, as you can imagine. But the worst part is, what Rome would do is take men that volunteered themselves. In fact, they paid to become this guy. They would become tax collectors, but it was people that were Jewish. So their own people were recruited to be the ones to collect their taxes, okay? So there was a bit of, oh, this feels a bit like someone I love and care about, part of my community, has now turned their back on me. They're backstabbing me. But what was even worse was how Rome was able to make this happen was they would tell the tax collectors, hey, listen, you charge what we need to collect for taxes, and then you're free to charge as much more as you choose. And whatever you charge, you can keep for your own profit. So these people would charge significantly more than what was owed to make their own profit. So now you can see why Jewish people hated tax collectors. It was their own people taking advantage of them. And then look at Zacchaeus. It says that he was rich. So you better believe he was making all of his money by essentially what some would argue was stealing from his own people. Zacchaeus was a hated man, if you want to understand the context. Let's look at the next verse. Then it says, and when Jesus came, and he was speaking to see who Jesus was. Now we're talking about Zacchaeus. But on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. Okay, so first thing we see, Zacchaeus is looking, he wants to see Jesus. Jesus has built a reputation. Everybody's talking about him. This guy is moving through. He might be the Messiah. We're not sure. But there is just great attention. Now, the truth is, Zacchaeus is likely not trying to see him as the Messiah. He's just trying to see what's going on. There's a buzz here. Some celebrity's in town. I want to go see him. But there was a problem with Zacchaeus. What was it? Short people problems, right? Some of you understand. I won't point you out. Short people problems. This is just truly practical, simple, right? He was a short man, small in stature, and he couldn't see over the crowd. I kind of think of, he was rich and short. I think of Danny DeVito. I don't know. Does that help? Maybe Simone Biles. I don't know. Okay, so he was small in stature. He couldn't see. So what did he do? He ran ahead. Now, we talked about this last week. Other Chad from Austin, he talked about how this was not very common. All right, men running in general was not a common thing, but particularly rich men. I mean, for our context today, imagine a guy wearing a $1,000 suit, maybe another $1,000 shoes. Then all of a sudden, you see him bolting down the street in Texas heat. It's not crazy, but it would not be common, right? It'd be a bit odd. Think of something similar. Zacchaeus runs ahead to try to see, and then what does he do? This is why kids love this story, by the way. He climbs up into a sycamore tree. Kids can connect with that, right? Tell me a story from the Bible. Somebody climbed in a tree. I'm all in. That sounds great. Where are the graham cracker or the animal cookies? Let's eat. This is a good story. But for us, that actually makes it even more intriguing. The fact that this man, who was what we would describe today as a wealthy businessman, but also a hated man, not really excited about Jewish culture, at least according to what we're learning from the story, yet he runs ahead and he climbs up in a tree. Now, the sycamore tree is a big tree, so it would have been able to hold him, no problem. It reminds us here that Zacchaeus, whether he knew exactly what was happening or not, he was willing to go to pretty extreme lengths to get a glimpse of Jesus. That's helpful in just a second. Let's keep going. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. Okay, so Zacchaeus is up in the tree. Jesus is down with the crowd. Jesus looks up in the tree. Remember we said Jesus is always on mission. Looks up into the tree, says, Zacchaeus, come on down. Now, if you're Zacchaeus, here's the thing. You're in this massive crowd of people that are just trying to get a glimpse, just like you, and all of a sudden, the celebrity calls you by name and says, come down, I'm going to your place. Okay, Zacchaeus is excited. It says he received him joyfully. You bet. The celebrity is now saying, I'm coming to your house. Can you imagine Taylor Swift walking? This is a terrible connection. I apologize, but let's just roll with it for a second because I already said it. Imagine Taylor Swift cruising down the street, looks up and sees you in the tree and goes, hey, come down. I'm coming to the Eros tour is coming to your house tonight. Of course he was excited, right? And so it says that he received him joyfully. Next verse. Now, when they saw it, they all grumbled. He has gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. Okay, so let's pause. So now we've got this story brewing. We're watching Zacchaeus. He's running ahead. He's doing things that are a bit counterculture. He's just trying to get a glimpse of Jesus. Probably doesn't fully know what's about to happen to him. And someone in the audience, a group of people, start to notice this. And we hit on this a little bit last week, but just to make sure we get it. It says that they grumbled. Why were they grumbling? Remember, Zacchaeus was a hated man. He was a tax collector. They didn't have an issue with him being there, though I'm sure they would have preferred he not be there. But now all of a sudden, Jesus, this teacher, this man that has built a reputation of doing good and teaching things that are enlightening and helpful, all of a sudden looks up and sees this in their eyes, terrible man and says, come down, I want to go to your house. And this is where the problem starts to lie. There's another group of people in this crowd, the religious teachers. These were the guys that were there to hold the law, to hold the standard, to make sure everything was done the right way, and they were pretty ruthless in how they did it. Likely it's them grumbling, but really everybody had a problem with Zacchaeus. The religious leaders mainly because Jesus was a teacher, and teachers don't teach to folks that don't follow the way, especially those that were outside of Jewish faith. The other Jews were just mad because this guy's been stealing from me my entire life, and now you're going to invite him? Why not me? Why not invite me to your house, Jesus? Now, we'll give them some credit. It says they grumbled. Grumbled means they didn't say it too loud, but at least they said it out loud. Some of us here, we just do it behind a keyboard, right? We know. Yeah, maybe. Shot fired at somebody. Sorry. Who is a sinner? Now watch this. Before we go to the next verse, something very interesting is going to happen between 7 and 8. Let's go to the next one. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. Now this is interesting. All of a sudden, this rich man, now we don't know if this was over a day, if this was over a quick encounter, maybe this could have even been overnight as they stayed in his home, but at some point, fairly quickly, there was a massive change in Zacchaeus. He says, I'm going to give half of my goods to the poor, and I'm going to restore what I have taken from others fourfold. Now, I want you to see something first. Nowhere in this, at least implied in the scripture, did Jesus ask him to do this. This was simply a response to the time he was spending with Jesus and the change that Jesus was making in his life in a short window. He says, I'm going to give half my goods to the poor. That's amazing. He's going to give back to help those in need. And then he says, for those I've defrauded, I will restore it fourfold. Interesting just to understand the context. Typically, if this happened, you were caught stealing from someone, you would give back what you owed plus 1/5. He says, I'm going to give fourfold. I'm going to give as much as needed. And you think about this, this is such a massive change of heart, right? The only way he got rich was from stealing from people, and now he's having a turnaround effect. Look at verse 9. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, and Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Today, salvation has come to this house. Jesus is declaring to everyone in the audience, I want you to see, this man is a changed man. He's also son of Abraham. He was reminding them that he was still Jewish this whole time. He was just making bad decisions. For the Son of Man came to what? This is what we talked about last week. To seek and save the lost. The point we made last week, the point we'll make again today, and really every week that we gather, is simply this when it comes to Jesus. To Jesus, everyone is valuable, even those that are away from God. Everyone is valuable to God, including those away from Him. Now, let's look at the last verse here. And Jesus said to him, go to the next one. Was that the end? Okay. Now let's pause. You might be wondering here, okay, that was an interesting little Bible lesson that we just had. Now you understand the story. Now I want to show you 3 things that I'm going to say are 3 questions that we can ask ourselves that I think are tremendously helpful. Okay? Let's think about the story particularly for the first one. Here's the first question. Am I the tree or the crowd? Am I the tree or the crowd? Think about it for a second. What did the crowd do? The crowd blocked Zacchaeus from being able to see Jesus. The tree elevated Zacchaeus so that he could get a better glimpse of Jesus. Now, if you are a follower of Jesus, you understand that God's very clear throughout Scripture that you and I have been invited into this mission. That we get to be a part of sharing the good news. We call that the gospel, which is simply that Jesus came to die so that you and I can be forgiven of sin and that we could live. And so as we navigate our life, a question that I'm asking myself is, am I the crowd or the tree? What does this look like? Well, if I'm the tree, probably, to give you some tangible things you can think about, I don't mind talking well of God. I try to help others who might be away from Him better be able to see Him. I try to live in a way, knowing we'll never be perfect, but I want to live in a way that honors God. These are ways, a few, that we can begin to be like the tree, more like the tree. We help others see Christ. But like the crowd, looks more like this. Maybe we talk ill of God. Maybe we get frustrated with God at times and we unpack that to everyone. Or maybe we just don't talk about God at all. If we never talk about God, it limits people from being able to better see Him. In fact, if we're the crowd, we end up just putting ourselves in the middle, so all they see instead of Christ is me or you. If I'm the crowd, I live in a way that confuses people. If you go to church, you attend church, and the people at your work know about it, but then you live just radically different from those things that happen at church, it can be sometimes confusing, right? We become more like the crowd, blocking the sight of Christ to others. Now, this was the main thing Jesus is articulating here. I want you to understand, I love everyone. I value everyone, including those away from me. So if we're going to live as Christ followers, for those in the room that have chosen Christ, if we're going to do this right, we want to help elevate people to be able to see Christ better. That's the first question that's helpful to ask. Here's the second one. Am I a good manager? Am I a good manager? Think about what Zacchaeus did. For his life, or at least for his adult life, he had been stealing from those in his audience. He had been stealing from his Jewish counterparts, his quote-unquote friends, those in his community. He had been stealing from them. He has this encounter with Jesus, a radical life change, and goes, man, I want to live differently. I want to do things differently. And so what does he do? He says, you know what? I have collected all of this in a way that's not God-honoring. Therefore, I want to take it and I want to use it wisely. You and I, we have many things in our life that we are managers over. I think of one today, we got a beautiful picture. Our kids, for those of us that have kids in the room, you're a manager over your kids. Now, what's the difference between a manager and an owner? This is important. Owners do whatever they want. Managers realize that there is someone they report to. There is someone that has oversight in their life. So what they do with the things that they have, it significantly matters because there's someone else that's being affected. For you and I, a healthy thing to do in life, and I get not all of us may be in this place just yet, but when you begin to realize, when you believe in God and say, man, God is so good, He's given me all of these things. I want to manage them well. The church word, by the way, is stewardship. I want to steward them well. I want to manage this well. So we go to our kids. When we think, oh, these are my kids, I own them, right? Sometimes in public, you pretend they're not your kids. I get that. But I own them. Well, that's a mindset. But if you think about, man, these kids I am managing. These are actually God's children. And I want to do my best to raise them well. Starts to challenge our thinking a little bit. Starts to challenge how we interact with our kids. Think of it like this. For those of us that have young kids, 20-something years from now, as your kids are telling their kids about their experience with you as their parent, they're not going to probably talk about how expensive the toys were you bought them or how lavish the vacations were, though that may come up at times. They're going to talk about how we made them feel. Were we present when we were there? Did we love them? Did we hang out with them? Were we always tired, or were we always hanging out on the couch watching something else because we were just too busy for them? We are instilling in them now what they're going to say about us years from now. And when we think about our kids, less about I own them, but more about I manage them, we realize, man, we get to point. And I think these parents, they portrayed such a beautiful picture for us today in that. How about your spouse? Sounds a little weird, right? Manage your spouse. But think of it like this. Your spouse is God's child that He's entrusted to you, that y'all together could help take care of each other and navigate this thing together. God expects you and I to love our spouse well, to treat them kindly. Now we begin to see how this idea of manager is so powerful. Think about many other things. Your wisdom, your experience, your resources, your time. Single people, your time. What a great opportunity you have. You have more time than you will when you're married and with kids. These are all, I think about resources. Think about your finances. How do you view it? This is where Zacchaeus kind of came to a halt. Hey, you know what? I could own this or I could manage it. And he's spending time with Jesus and realized, you know what? I want to manage this well. Sarah and I, We haven't had too many experiences, like really any like this, but when we were preparing to come out to Missouri City to move out here from Katy, we sold our home and were able to move out here. But when we sold our home, we sold it at that perfect time in the market where everything was just crazy. And we got an unbelievable offer on our home that gave us an excess amount of money that we have never had and probably, in all honesty, will never have again. And I remember Sarah and I sitting down going, okay, this is kind of crazy. We have this money. What do we do? How do we do this well? Now, I can't say I was thinking about this message today, but I can tell you now, looking back, I see what God was doing. So a couple things we thought of, and I say this to you not as a look at us, but more of a, hey, we want to practice what we preach as much as we hope you'll follow, and as we follow God, do more that he asks us to do. So watch this. So first thing we did, we said, hey, at our past church, there was a little campaign going on, and we made a commitment. So let's make sure, even though we're leaving early, let's make sure we fulfill that commitment. Then we said, man, we're coming to RPC. We love this place. We believe in this place. We are putting all of our eggs in this place because we're moving here and taking this job. So we said, hey, let's give some to RPC. We want to support this mission that we're going to. But then we got to do something super cool. You ready for this? We thought of two couples in our life, two young couples. One was about to have their first child, and the other one was about to buy their first home. And we said, hey, this will be really fun. Let's bless them. So we invited them to dinner. We put some cash in an envelope. We had dinner with them, and then we handed them the envelope. And I got to tell you, man, as we sat there at dinner, it was such a cool experience to just be like, man, we are just going to hopefully help them so much. What an experience. Can I tell you what was really cool? When we finished all of that, we still had a little bit left to do what we wanted to do. And I can't promise that's how it always works with God, but I do know this. God is faithful. And I think when we're faithful with what he's given us, whether it's our money or our resources, our time, our kids, our spouse, all of the above, when we're good managers, I believe God blesses us. He blesses us. So I ask you, are you being a good manager with what God has entrusted to you in your life? And finally, the last one, this is a big one. Is there something I need to reconcile? Is there something I need to reconcile? Think about what Zacchaeus did. He realized he had lived his life in a way that wasn't quite Christ-honoring. He said, man, I need to make a change. I want to go back. I want to try to fix this. So he said, I'm going to go try to repair all the damage I've done through how I've collected my money. Maybe for some of us today, the only thing we needed to hear was that, man, there's something or someone in my life that I need to get back and reconcile with. Maybe it's something I did. Maybe it's something I unintentionally did, whatever it might be. What an amazing day to be able to say, you know what? I want to go and get this right. Now, if you didn't think of any, if someone or something didn't come to mind, maybe you're good for this season, and that's a wonderful place to be. But if something came to mind as I said that, this might be a wonderful time for you to go, you know what? I'm going to pick up the phone. Or I'm going to head over there. I want to try to make a connection here because I'd love to reconcile this. Now, here's the thing. Whenever we get in this, and this could be its own message, and I don't want to go too far in this, but I want to say this. When we try to reconcile with folks, sometimes they are not ready to reconcile with us. We didn't hear the rest of the story. We don't know what happened. We don't know if everyone received Zacchaeus with all of his money. I kind of imagine they did, even if it's just for the money, not so much for him. But we don't know how that reconciliation went. But we know that he tried. What I'd say to you, the best thing I could say to you is something I try to tell myself. I am faithful only for my own actions. So if I feel God is stirring me to go and to fix something, to reconcile something, to deal with something, I just want to be faithful to do that. But how they respond is beyond my control. And so today, if maybe there's even just one person here that knows they need to step out and go try to reconcile something, don't get too worked up if it doesn't come right back. Just know that you've been faithful trying to do what God's asked you to do. So here's how I'd put all this. I would say, loosen your grip. Loosen your grip. We weren't intended to hold on to some of these things. We weren't intended to choose self over others. That's not what God's designed us to do. That's not why He's placed us here. We weren't designed to hold on to stuff over generosity. By the way, we're not going to pass the plates or anything. We're not collecting an offering. That's not what this is about. But you and I weren't designed to hold on to stuff over generosity. God's blessed you and I with so many different resources. Let's be faithful with them. And we weren't called to hold on to angerness or bitterness, but rather to go and to seek reconciliation. This is God's design. We weren't designed, or He doesn't desire for you and I to hold on to these things. What a great story. Let's be about others. Let's be generous as God leads. And let's rebuild bridges if there is a bridge that is broken. I don't know. That seems to me like some helpful things we can navigate in our life. I hope we're not all Zacchaeuses, but I think the deeper we look, we might find some areas where this is very relevant for us. And if I could leave you with one last thing, just a quick thing I'm thinking of. I love how Zacchaeus ran up into that tree to get a glimpse of Jesus. And I know it's hard. The longer we walk with God, we maybe get at times less and less excited about who He is or what He's done. And I know none of us would want to actually say that, but it can happen. I want to just encourage you to keep God at the center of your life, to keep Him exciting, to pursue Him as you would pursue anyone else, so that He remains the constant in your life. Because it's Him that begins to navigate the way we see and the way we live this life out. And man, we want that for you.